Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan. Today's been a very slow news day, so I decided to go back to the old faithful well that is the Rings of Power. And I found quite an exceptional article that really sums up the phrase, "it is never enough," and really exemplifies why we use that phrase so much to apply toward the entertainment industry and those who really want wokeness out of storytelling more than good storytelling. It is just quite profound how much chivalry, how much copium is in this article. We're going to jump into it in a moment, but "it is never enough" is used so many times and so accurately because no matter how much diversity, inclusion, representation, wokeness, identity politics, all the buzzwords are included in a show or entertainment property, it is never enough. No matter how much these studios bastardize and desecrate the source material for these identity politics reasons, the Twitter mob, the woke left, will always attack it in the end because it is never enough. And it seems like someone in that sphere is coming after the Rings of Power for it not being woke enough, for it not having enough representation, and so it's getting criticized from the opposite aisle. I wonder if they're going to respond to them more than they responded to the real fans who have legitimate criticism against the show. This article comes to us from The Independent, and as soon as you read the title, you know it's going to be gold, because it says, "Why are there so many men in the Rings of Power?" It's asking why there are too many men in Rings of Power. I love it. This is so stupid. Now, of course, the actual source material with Lord of the Rings and the lore that predates it is substantially male. And guess what? That's okay. Certain franchises can lead one way, certain franchises can lead the other way. No one is going to get upset at shows like Charmed and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, both of which I enjoy. Buffy, I really, really love, for having female characters be the predominant force in the story. No one has any issue with that. It just depends on the story, and it makes more sense for this medieval fantasy that was based off a Catholic man's beliefs. It makes sense for this world, and Rings of Power really went way overboard with the representation. And that's something that a lot of people said. Its bigger problem is its abysmal writing, but these representation aspects were used to excuse the bad writing. And now those are getting attacked. The excuses are getting attacked for not being good enough excuses by the woke left, and I love it. I love it. It's so stupid. He continues, "Female characters these days do more than bring warriors their post-battle beers." I don't think I've ever seen that. Eowyn, I guess, does bring Aragorn a ale in the beginning of Return of the King after the Battle of Helm's Deep. I guess she does, but she's also a great character who participates in the battle in that movie as well. I think that's the only time I can think of that a warrior is brought a beer by a woman after a battle. That's weird. But they still don't exist in worlds where they are half the population. So it's 50-50 or nothing, or overrepresentation or nothing. It is never going to be enough. If the Rings of Power had exactly a 50-50 split of female to men, he'd probably be saying, yeah, great, there are women in it, but what about the trans representation? Oh, great, there's women in it, but not enough of them are BIPOC women. Oh, it's not 50-50 this, it's not 50-50 that. It is never going to be enough, and this exemplifies it. The woke Rings of Power isn't woke enough. I just love it. Eat their own. Woke and woke crime is some of the most entertaining things that I get to review on this channel. But going down, he has some great ways to put it. It's the granddaddy of franchises, and yes, I'm using the male gender because of the Lord of the Rings almost completely ignores just over 50% of the human population. It's like, Lord of the Rings is the granddaddy, and yes, I did that as an insult because it's all man. What the hell? What the hell? You know what? It's okay to be predominantly male. It's okay to be predominantly female. It depends on the story and the creator's intentions. It's okay. It's okay that you're a man too. You don't have to be ashamed of yourself. It's okay. But it's 50% of the population, sure, but it doesn't represent the culture that they have. And it's a culture that was very representative of our world in the medieval era. How many women would you see on a battlefield in medieval England? There's a reason for that. And whether or not you agree with that reason, it is still there and it's still evident. And so why shouldn't a world based on that landscape be representative of how the world actually existed? That's something that these people really don't understand, is they don't want to represent reality. And that's something that we see time and time again from the overrepresentation of certain aspects of society that are very, very minute, saying that they have to be up near the 50% marker as well. That's not reality. Oh, history wasn't exactly as woke as you'd like it to be. Ignore it. Pretend it doesn't exist or attack it. Those are the only two options that they have. Ignoring reality is no basis for building a fantasy franchise or just a entertainment property in general. You still have to depict the reality that it's based off of and make sense within the world that it is built around. There is such a thing as reality in Lord of the Rings. It's a complicated subject for people like this, but yes, there is a basis for what's true and what's not in both the real world and in a fantasy landscape. Just keep consistent with your own internal rules, and if it's based off a certain area and a certain time period, represent that as well. It's not that hard. It is not that hard, but continuing. Women barely get a look in, with the notable exception of Éowyn, the slayer of the big nasty of the ring race. You do not desecrate Éowyn's achievements. You do not debase her achievements and say, oh yeah, all she did was some big nasty ring race. That is insulting to Éowyn. She is some people's favorite character. She is one of the best characters in Lord of the Rings. And so you cannot debase her by saying, oh yeah, she just got the big nasty ring race, and somehow think that supports your argument. No, you're taking the best example of women characters and debasing her to fit your narrative. You cannot do that because what she did was extraordinary. Extraordinary. There are a few people alive in Lord of the Rings who could have done what she did. Do not insult her for your own narrative. And of course, Galadriel he mentions there. Doesn't really say much about Galadriel. But Éowyn, don't insult Éowyn to somehow support your point. You can't degrade the evidence that female characters are in the story as evidence that they're not in the story. It's a really, really double-edged approach that is very, very hypocritical. He continues, but while that's improvement, talking about Rings of Power's representation, they're still outnumbered by the boys. Women are underrepresented among the secondary characters too. So he's like, oh yeah, Lord of the Rings, really, really not diverse. And then Rings of Power came along and they had a perfect opportunity to be diverse. And they just weren't enough. It's an improvement, yeah, but it's not 50-50 or female overarching more females. Yeah, but all the main characters were female. Yeah, sure, there might have been more male characters in general, but of the main characters with the most speaking line and the most screen time, it is predominantly female. I'd say 70%. And of that 30% male audience, they were all depicted in a negative light. So the positive protagonists were all female. That's 100% representation. It's not enough. It's not enough. Never gonna be enough. God damn, I love this guy. So he says, the incels will snarl that I'm virtue signaling or worse. I guess he's very aware of what he's doing because, yeah, that is virtue signaling to the 9th degree. Ignoring reality in the case of Éowyn and how the representation is utilized in Rings of Power to build this narrative to attack fans is virtue signaling at the 9th degree. And using the word incel isn't some sort of shut down argument that they seem to think it does anymore. Its definition has been so corrupted by just, oh, you don't agree with me? You're a man who doesn't agree with me? You're an incel? The definition has been so eroded entirely that it means nothing, and no one cares if they're called an incel anymore because it doesn't represent reality. It's just a meaningless insult attempting to make you shut up. And so if you're saying, oh yeah, I'm calling you out for virtue signaling and you're calling me an incel for it, fine, it doesn't actually mean anything these days and is not representative of reality. Again, reality doesn't exist for these people, but I'm okay with that. I believe in equality. Rings of Power, like I said, it's well past equality, but you're not criticizing the predominant positive female roles being at 100%. Not representing that at all. Ignoring reality once again, and not talking about the inequality that the Rings of Power does in the opposite direction of your own narrative. Sometimes it can go one way, predominantly male. Sometimes it can go another way, predominantly female. And as long as it fits within the world that was built around it, it's something that this man will never understand. But they still don't exist in a world where they are half the population in Rings of Power, and must be true of elves, dwarves, and hobbits, just as it is for humans. It's never enough. Still, after praising several female characters who are the main characters, the only characters that are portrayed in a positive light within the Rings of Power, he ends with, it is never enough. And that is something that we say so often because it is so applicable to the woke left, is they will never be satisfied. It will never be enough until utter domination is the only thing represented in Hollywood. And I'm just going to be here to call it out and laugh at woke and woke crime whenever it comes up because it is one of the most entertaining things to come out of Hollywood in recent years. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon.